My name is Heather McCurdy, 30 years old. The afternoon light streamed through the chandeliers of the Riverside Country Club, scattering fragments of gold across the white tablecloths. From my seat by the window, I could see the perfectly trimmed lawns, the river glittering beyond the golf course, and my reflection smiling faintly politely and not at all sincerely. It was my grandmother's 80th birthday, and every member of the McCurdy family had shown up in their best outfits and worst intentions. My Aunt Patricia was already orchestrating the table arrangement like a general preparing for battle. "Heather, darling," she said, as I approached, her voice honeyed and hollow, "we weren't sure you'd make it. You've been so busy with your little projects." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, keeping my tone even. Patricia's son, my cousin Bradley, gave me the kind of smile that belonged on a company brochure. Perfect teeth, no warmth. "Wow, Heather. Haven't seen you since the last reunion. How's that freelancing thing going?" I sat down at the far end of the table, the seat no one else wanted. "It's going well," I said. Bradley leaned back. "Still doing websites or apps or something like that?" "Something like that," I said again. The same conversation. Every year. The same questions asked with the same thinly disguised superiority. Bradley was 32 and worked for his father-in-law's investment firm. His sister Miranda organized charity galas and lived off her husband's family trust. Between them, they'd inherited enough money to look successful without ever having to prove it. Uncle Charles cleared his throat. "Your grandmother says you were overseas again." "Yes, Singapore and Tokyo." "Oh, for work?" Patricia asked, her eyebrows arching. I nodded. "Yes, for work." The table fell silent, as if that single word "work" was too inelegant for polite company. Grandmother Eleanor, regal as ever in a pale blue dress and pearl earrings, smiled warmly from the head of the table. "I'm proud of you, Heather. Always have been." Her voice steadied me. She was the only one who saw me as more than a disappointment in sensible shoes. Still, I could feel the weight of every sideways glance, every strained smile. This family measured success by properties owned and parties hosted, not by effort or achievement. And in their eyes, my consulting business was barely one step above unemployment. The club staff glided between tables, serving salmon with dill sauce and wine older than I was. I watched my relatives chatter about golf tournaments and Mediterranean cruises. No one asked about my life. No one ever did. Bradley raised his glass suddenly. "Well, speaking of milestones," he said, puffed with pride, "Jennifer and I have some exciting news. We just put in an offer on the Morrison estate." The table erupted in applause. Patricia's face lit up with delight. "Oh, Bradley, that's wonderful. The Morrison property is a landmark." "Yes," Bradley said. "We'll know by next week if it's ours." I smiled faintly, sipping my wine to hide the twist of irony that rose in my chest. 2 weeks ago, my financial advisor had called me. The Morrison estate is available again. Still interested, I'd said yes. Full asking price. Cash. No contingencies. As they celebrated Bradley's imaginary victory, I wondered whether to tell him that his offer had never stood a chance. But I stayed silent. Miranda leaned toward me, feigning concern. "Heather, you're so quiet. You must feel a little out of place with all these business and real estate discussions." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "I've always liked listening." "Still budgeting carefully, dear," Patricia added. "It must be difficult managing your finances without a steady paycheck." The words slid off her tongue like sugar over glass sweet, but meant to cut. "I manage," I said. And I did. I managed billion-dollar accounts and international teams. I managed acquisitions, mergers, and projects that shaped industries. But none of that mattered here. Not in this room where history, not merit, dictated worth. As they laughed about golf scores and dinner parties, I noticed the club manager Robert standing at a distance. Our eyes met for a second too long. He nodded respectfully as if to his employer. I gave a slight nod back. No one at the table noticed. Outside, the late sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. I felt them stretch inside me, the same kind of darkness that comes from being underestimated for too long. Across the table, Bradley raised his wine again. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. I raised my glass too, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "Oh, cousin," I thought silently, "you have no idea how new beginnings really look." The laughter around the table swelled again, but none of it reached me. Every sound felt distant, like I was watching the scene through a pane of glass. Bradley's voice carried above the rest, smooth and practiced, talking about renovation plans for the Morrison estate that he didn't actually own. It was almost funny, almost. Patricia touched her pearl necklace, smiling proudly. "You've done so well for yourself, Bradley. Your father would be thrilled to see you carry on the McCurdy reputation. Miranda sighed theatrically. Yes, success runs in our bloodline. Her eyes flicked toward me, just long enough to remind everyone who didn't quite fit that lineage. I cut into my salad, quiet and deliberate. The club salmon was indeed excellent, as my grandmother had mentioned, but I'd lost my appetite. Every bite here tasted like pretense. So Heather Charles said in that patronizing tone that only an older brother of your late father could perfect. Still working independently? Yes, I said. He smiled as though he'd caught me in something pitiful. Well, freelancing has its charm when you're young, but stability is important. Retirement, health insurance, all that. Patricia nodded. You really should think about a proper career, something more permanent. Like Bradley's position at the firm, I asked mildly. Bradley beamed, assuming it was praise. Exactly. Something solid, with structure. I smiled faintly. Structure can be overrated. Their laughter, light, dismissive, was the same kind that had followed me since childhood. I'd heard it when I'd chosen computer science instead of law, when I'd turned down a marriage proposal from a wealthy banker, when I'd moved into my small apartment instead of the family estate. The same laughter that taught me the difference between being tolerated and being seen. As dessert menus arrived, I stood. Excuse me, I murmured. I'll be right back. The ladies' lounge was a sanctuary of marble and mirrors. I leaned over the sink, letting the cool water run through my fingers. My reflection stared back composed but strained. Behind the calm eyes, 1,000 swallowed words pressed against my throat. Then the door opened. Can you believe she actually came? Miranda's voice. I froze. I thought she might skip it, Patricia replied. These family gatherings must be unbearable for her. Miranda laughed softly. Poor thing. Probably the only proper meal she gets all month. Imagine still renting an apartment at 30. Oh, it's tragic, Patricia said. And that so-called business of hers, it's like playing pretend. Some people just don't have the drive. Their words hit me harder than I wanted to admit, not because they surprised me, but because they didn't. I'd known what they thought. I just hadn't expected to hear it echo off marble walls. I straightened slowly, watching their reflections appear in the mirror beside mine. Neither of them had noticed me yet. Patricia was fixing her lipstick. Miranda was checking her phone. For a moment, I almost walked out quietly. But then Miranda chuckled again. At least she tries. Even if it's just cute. That word cute landed like a blade. I turned deliberately. I suppose cute is one way to describe 8 years of international contracts and 3 acquisition deals. They both froze faces, draining of color. Sst, Heather. Patricia stammered. We didn't see you there. I gathered. Miranda swallowed. We were just having a private conversation, I finished for her. I understand. I dried my hands with a crisp towel, each movement controlled, deliberate. Then I paused at the door and looked at them through the mirror. You know, I said quietly, I used to wish I could make this family proud. Now I just wish you'd learn the difference between success and spectacle. Their mouths opened, but no words came out. I left the lounge without another glance. As I stepped back into the dining room, the noise and light returned in full force. The chandeliers sparkled as if nothing had happened. My seat was still waiting, empty and cold. When I sat down again, my grandmother's gentle hand touched mine. Everything all right, dear? Yes, I said softly. Perfect. But the lie tasted like iron. Across the table, Bradley was laughing about how the Morrison estate's owner would probably accept his offer by Monday. I smiled thinly, the sound of Patricia's and Miranda's voices still ringing in my head. By Monday, I thought, he'll find out who the owner really is. And for the first time all evening, I felt a quiet, dangerous satisfaction settle in my chest. By the time I returned to my seat, dessert was being served, grandmother's favorite chocolate cake, rich and glossy, under the chandelier light. It was a familiar ritual one that marked every family celebration since I was a child. But tonight, the sweetness didn't land right. Chocolate cake for our Heather. Grandmother said warmly, her eyes twinkling. It's still your favorite, isn't it? I smiled. Always. It wasn't just my favorite. It was a reminder of every birthday, every gathering, where I'd tried to prove myself and failed. The cake had always tasted the same, perfect, decadent, and heavy with nostalgia. So dear Eleanor continued, Where are you traveling next? I worry about you being alone so often. I'll be in London next month, I said, slicing the cake with my fork. Then Berlin in the spring. Patricia tilted her head. More consulting? She said the word as though it were a foreign language. Yes, I replied. Bradley leaned forward, curiosity piqued. That must be exhausting, jumping from one short-term gig to another. Have you ever thought about finding something stable? Something with structure, Miranda added, parroting her brother. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over the table. The club manager, Robert, approached with his usual quiet professionalism. "Good evening, everyone," he said, giving a polite nod to the family. "I hope you're enjoying Mrs. McCurdy's birthday celebration." "We are my grandmother," replied graciously. "Everything has been perfect, Robert. Please thank the chef." "Of course." Robert's gaze shifted to me. "Ms. McCurdy, I wanted to inform you the quarterly financial reports you requested are ready. Would you like them sent to your office or the boardroom?" The table fell silent, utterly perfectly silent. I could hear the faint hum of the chandelier, the clinking of glasses at other tables, even someone laughing in the next room. But here at ours, the air froze solid. Bradley's fork hung midair. Patricia blinked as if trying to process what she'd heard. I didn't move. "You can send them to my usual table, Robert. I'll review them in the morning." "Very good, Ms. McCurdy." He smiled professionally. "Also, the East Wing renovations are on schedule. The private dining rooms should be ready before spring." "Excellent," I said calmly. "Let's arrange a walkthrough tomorrow at 10. Robert nodded, unaware of the tension thickening around us, then moved on to another table. The silence stretched thin enough to snap. Bradley was the first to speak. "Heather, what financial reports?" "The club's quarterly reports," I said simply, lifting my coffee cup to my lips. Patricia frowned. "Why would you need those?" I met her gaze steady and unblinking. "Because I own the Riverside Country Club." It was as though the chandeliers dimmed, or maybe the entire room just tilted slightly out of balance. What Miranda whispered. I set my cup down carefully. "I purchased it 18 months ago. The previous ownership group was looking to sell, and I made an offer they couldn't refuse." Charles choked on his wine. Patricia's hand went to her pearls again, clutching them, as if they could anchor her in reality. Bradley laughed weakly. "You're joking." "I'm not," I said. "Williams Digital Solutions. My company acquired full ownership of the Riverside Country Club, along with several other properties." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Williams Digital?" What Patricia stammered. "The consulting firm I started 8 years ago," I said, leaning back slightly. "You might know it as that computer thing I've been doing." No one spoke. Even the background chatter from other tables seemed to fade. I let them sit in the silence they'd built around me for years. The silence of assumptions of dismissal, of polite pity. Finally, Bradley found his voice brittle and cracking. "You own this place, as in the land, the building, everything." I nodded once. "Everything." Charles blinked rapidly. "But that would cost 80 million, I said softly. 68 for the purchase, 12 in renovations." Patricia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Miranda's fork clattered against her plate. Across the table, my grandmother started to laugh softly at first, then fully joyfully. "Heather McCurdy," she said between chuckles, "you've been sitting here letting us scold you about stability while owning the very ground we're sitting on." I smiled faintly. It seemed simpler that way. Bradley's face drained of color. "Wait," he leaned forward. Did you also buy the Morrison estate?" I met his eyes. "I did." He went completely still. "You mean the offer I just made?" "Was too late," I said gently. "I closed 2 weeks ago. Full asking price. Cash." Patricia's voice rose in disbelief. "You bought the property your cousin wanted." "I made a business decision," I replied evenly. It wasn't personal. "But you let him go on and on about it all through lunch," Miranda burst out. "I didn't want to interrupt," I said. "Besides, I thought we were here to celebrate grandmother." The tension at the table was electric, the kind that hummed under your skin. For years, they'd looked at me and seen a disappointment, a stray branch on the family tree. Now they were struggling to recognize the same face in front of them. Grandmother Eleanor's laughter subsided into a smile of pride. "You've kept quite the secret, haven't you?" "Just a few," I admitted softly. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small at this table. I felt seen. For a long moment, no one moved. Even the waiters seemed to sense the invisible wall of shock that had fallen over our table. The only sound was the faint clink of a spoon against a coffee cup somewhere in the distance. Bradley stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. His face was pale, jaw tight, the practiced confidence gone. "You bought it. The estate. The country club. You." He stopped mid-sentence, exhaling sharply. "You let me humiliate myself." "I didn't let you do anything," I said quietly. "You assumed as usual." Miranda's cheeks were flushed a nervous pink. "We had no idea you were well successful." "No," I replied, meeting her eyes, "you didn't. Because you never asked." Patricia found her voice brittle with disbelief. "But Heather, why didn't you tell us all these years sitting there listening to us, letting us think you were struggling?" "Because I said you never would have believed me anyway." Charles leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed. "Williams Digital Solutions. That's yours." "Yes." What exactly do you do? I set my napkin aside, folding it carefully. We help traditional companies modernize their technology. Automation, data systems, cybersecurity, infrastructure. It started as freelance work when I was 22. Then came a mobile app acquisition, some venture capital partnerships, and now global contracts. Offices in 6 countries. Patricia blinked, struggling to process the shift. You're telling me your computer thing turned into all that? Correct. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Then Bradley slammed his hand on the table. So you've been a billionaire this whole time while we... He stopped himself, but the bitterness was unmistakable. While you pitied me, I finished. His jaw tightened. I wasn't going to say that. No need, I said softly. Eleanor, my grandmother, finally broke the tension with a knowing smile. You remind me so much of your grandfather, she said. He was underestimated, too. Everyone thought he'd fail when he started his first company. Patricia turned to her. You knew. Eleanor chuckled. I suspected. When Robert mentioned Heather's name at last year's charity dinner, I asked him quietly. I wanted to see how long it would take for the rest of you to notice. A slow, amused glint sparkled in her eyes. You didn't disappoint. Miranda exhaled shakily. I can't believe this. You own the place we've been coming to for decades. That's part of why I bought it, I said. This club has been part of our family history. I wanted to preserve it and improve it. Charles rubbed his forehead. $80 million. That's absurd. Business, I said, not sentimentality, though sentiment had a small hand in it. Bradley leaned back, his pride cracking. You must have enjoyed watching us talk down to you. I looked at him steadily. No, it wasn't enjoyable, just necessary. Patricia frowned. Necessary for what? To remember who I was before I built the company, before money changed how people saw me. I wanted to see if anyone here cared about me for more than status. The words hung there like smoke, and I saw discomfort ripple across their faces. For the first time, I didn't rush to ease it. I let them sit with it. My grandmother's voice softened. And what did you find, dear? That the silence was louder than I expected, I said, and lonelier. Her eyes glistened. Oh, Heather. Bradley ran a hand through his hair, muttering, unbelievable. It's not unbelievable, I said. Just inconvenient. Eleanor chuckled again, though her tone was gentle. You've certainly shaken this family awake. About time someone did. I didn't mean to embarrass anyone, I said, meaning it. But I won't apologize for who I became. Patricia sighed heavily, voice trembling with guilt. Heather. Don't, I said, cutting her off softly. Not tonight. For once everyone fell quiet. The weight of truth was uncomfortable but cleansing. After dessert, as people began to gather their coats, I stepped aside to breathe near the window. The glass reflected my face, faintly overlaid with the soft glow of chandeliers, distorted yet familiar. Eleanor joined me, walking slower than usual, but steady. You've carried this secret long enough, haven't you? She said. I nodded. It was easier to hide than explain. You wanted them to see you, not your success. Yes, I whispered, but I don't think they ever will. She smiled sadly. Give them time. Pride breaks slowly, but it breaks all the same. Behind us, Bradley and Miranda were whispering, their voices hushed, but no longer cruel. Patricia stood alone, clutching her purse like it could protect her from regret. As my grandmother squeezed my hand, I felt something shift inside me. Less triumph, more release. For years, I'd fantasized about this moment, watching their faces collapse under the weight of realization. But now that it had happened, victory didn't taste like I'd imagined. It tasted bittersweet. Maybe that was the point. I turned to my grandmother. You always said revenge isn't worth the cost. She nodded. But sometimes a little truth is priceless. I smiled faintly. Then tonight's bill is paid in full. By the next morning, the story had already spread through the family like wildfire. I didn't need to check my phone to know the group chat was flooded with messages. Shock, disbelief, apology. Each one typed through trembling pride. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove back to the club. The place looked different in the quiet light of early morning, less grand, more human. The river mist curled around the lawns, and somewhere in the distance the hum of sprinklers filled the silence. This had once been my family's symbol of exclusion. Now it was my home ground. Robert met me at the entrance, holding a leather folder. Morning, Ms. McCurdy. The East Wing contractors have arrived. Shall I bring the board papers to your office? Yes, thank you, Robert. He hesitated, then said with a small smile, if I may, yesterday's celebration was memorable. I gave a faint smile. That's one word for it. By the time I walked into my office overlooking the river, I'd already made peace with what had happened, or so I thought. But the truth was heavier than I expected. I hadn't just revealed a secret. I'd broken a rhythm my family had lived in for decades, one where they were above and I was below. And once you break that rhythm, nothing ever sounds the same again. That afternoon, my grandmother called. Her voice was softer than usual, edged with something like regret. "Heather, darling, would you come by later today? I'd like to talk before your next trip." Of course, I said. When I arrived, the house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Eleanor sat in her armchair, a book open, but unread in her lap. She looked up and smiled. "I didn't sleep much last night. Too many thoughts. Too much pride, maybe." I sat across from her. "You don't owe me an apology, grandmother." "I wasn't going to offer one," she said gently. "Just a confession. I let this family become a mirror hall of arrogance. We measured worth in the wrong currency. And Her voice broke slightly. "I watched you pay the price for it." I swallowed hard. "You always believed in me." "I did, but I should have spoken it more often." She reached for my hand. "Don't let success harden you, Heather. Let it teach you." That line lingered. Let it teach you. Later that week, Patricia called. The hesitation in her voice was palpable. "Heather," she began, "I owe you an apology for what I said in the lounge. It was cruel and undeserved." "Yes, it was," I replied honestly. "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. "I just realized I don't know you at all. None of us do." I could have ended the call there, but something in her tone, something small and unfamiliar, made me pause. "Then start there," I said. "Get to know me." Silence, then a quiet "I'd like that." Bradley showed up in my office 2 days later, holding 2 coffees like a peace offering. His pride had taken a visible beating, but his eyes carried something different this time: humility. "I came to talk," he said, setting a cup on my desk. "No speeches, just talk." "All right." He sat down awkwardly, clearing his throat. "I've been thinking about how I treated you. How I treated everyone who didn't fit my definition of success." I said nothing, letting him wrestle with the discomfort. "I was jealous," he admitted. "Not of your money, though. God, that's a lot. But of how you built it yourself. I've never done that. I've always had a hand to hold a net to fall on." There was a long pause before I said quietly, "Do you know what that net costs you?" He looked confused. "Self-respect," I said. "It's comfortable until you realize you've never learned how to land on your own." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I just wish I'd known that sooner." "You do now." When he left, he didn't look defeated, just thoughtful, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the man he might have been without the privilege. That weekend, I met with my grandmother again at the club. The air was crisp sunlight breaking through the clouds. She looked around the dining room, freshly renovated, polished floors gleaming. "You've turned this place into something extraordinary," she said. "Thank you. But more than that," she added, "you've changed the way this family looks at itself. Maybe not all at once, but it's happening." I smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I set out to do that." "Maybe not, but you did." She leaned closer, her hand resting on mine. "You've already proven them wrong, Heather. Now prove yourself right by forgiving them." Her words landed softly, but they lingered long after she left. That night, I sat alone in the club's main hall, lights dimmed reflections of chandeliers dancing across the marble floor. I thought of every cruel comment, every dismissive smile, every dinner where I'd been invisible. And yet beneath the ache, there was peace. Because for the first time, I didn't need their approval. I only needed to decide what kind of person I'd be, now that I finally had their attention. And I knew deep down that revenge had already done its job. Now it was time for grace to take over. 3 months later, I stood once again in the grand dining hall of the Riverside Country Club, my club. The chandeliers glowed brighter now, their crystal prisms scattering light like fragments of redemption across the polished tables. The renovations were complete new carpets, modern lighting, and subtle touches that merged tradition with quiet innovation. This time I wasn't sitting at the edge of the room. I was at the center table hosting the first official McCurdy family gathering under my ownership. And what a difference 3 months made. Bradley arrived first, his handshake firmer than before, his voice softer. "The place looks incredible, Heather. You've turned it into something even better than I remember." "Thank you," I said. "It's still a work in progress, like all of us." He smiled. There was no trace of competition in his eyes anymore, only a hint of respect that hadn't existed before. Patricia followed, dressed impeccably as always, but with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. She handed me a small box. "A housewarming gift," she said nervously. Inside was a delicate pen, gold-plated, engraved with McCurdy. "For signing more of those big deals you make." I laughed softly. "Thank you, Aunt Patricia. I'll put it to good use." Even Miranda hugged me when she arrived, something I hadn't expected. I started taking a course in digital marketing, she admitted shyly. I thought maybe I could learn a little about what you do. That's a good start, I said genuinely. If you ever want to visit our office, I'll introduce you to the team. She blinked surprised. Really? Really? As the family gathered, I watched them from across the table. The same people who once whispered about my failures, now leaning forward, listening, curious. They asked about my company, my travels, my future projects, not with skepticism, but with real interest. It wasn't the respect of awe, it was the respect of understanding. Grandmother Eleanor sat beside me, her eyes bright with pride. You've done more than build a business, Heather, she said. You've rebuilt this family. I shook my head gently. No, grandmother, I just stopped hiding. Her smile was wistful. Sometimes that's the hardest thing of all. The waiter served dinner, and the room filled with laughter again this time, not the brittle performative kind. The sound felt genuine human. I realized that perhaps what I'd really wanted all along wasn't revenge or validation. It was connection. As dessert arrived, that same chocolate cake that had witnessed my humiliation months ago, Bradley raised his glass. To Heather, he said simply, "For showing us what real strength looks like." Everyone echoed the toast. Even Patricia's eyes glistened. I smiled, but this time it wasn't the restrained smile of self-control. It was real. After dinner, when the others had drifted toward the patio overlooking the river, I stayed behind for a moment. The chandeliers reflected in the glass wall before me, casting 1,000 versions of myself. The outcast, the dreamer, the builder, the woman who finally stopped needing permission to exist. I walked to my old seat, the lonely one at the end of the table where I used to hide, and placed my hand on the chair's back. The memory of that first reunion washed over me. The dismissive questions, the patronizing smiles, the whispered pity. And now the same chair sat under the same lights, but the world had shifted completely. Power doesn't come from being seen, I thought. It comes from knowing who you are when no one's looking. Through the window, the river shimmered with reflected light, the same river that had witnessed my quiet endurance, my years of silence, and now my calm triumph. Grandmother's voice echoed softly behind me. You're thinking again, aren't you? I turned to her with a smile. Always. She approached, her hand resting gently on my arm. I hope you know, dear, your success isn't what changed them. It was your grace. Her words caught me off guard. Grace. Maybe she was right, because wealth could buy respect, but only grace could earn forgiveness. Outside, laughter drifted back into the hall as my family called for me to join them. I looked around the room one last time, feeling the warmth settle in my chest, not the pride of winning, but the peace of understanding. Once they'd whispered that I didn't belong here, that I couldn't afford to sit among them. Now they gathered here because I chose to let them in. Owning the club had never really been the victory. Learning to open its doors, that was. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped toward the light spilling in from the terrace where my family waited. And for the first time in years, I wasn't an outsider watching from a distance. I was home.